Foreign troops must stick to the deadline for withdrawing from Afghanistan. We have an exclusive interview with a Taliban spokesperson. President-elect Hakainde Hichilema's top priority is fixing Zambia's economy. We focus on his journey to the presidency. And we'll look at setbacks in administering COVID-19 vaccines in African countries. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Ramanyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Kenya's standard gauge rail line has moved over 2 million tons of cargo in the first 5 months of 2021. And Royal Dutch Shell has lost a Nigeria oil license to the state company NNPC in the wake of a court ruling. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. We begin in Afghanistan, where the German military says 1 Afghan has been killed and 3 others injured in an early morning fight with unidentified gunmen at Kabul's international airport. Kabul's airport has been in chaos in the week since the Taliban entered the capital on August the 15th. As evacuations continue, the Taliban say foreign troops must stick to a withdrawal deadline of August 31st. Negotiations continue in Kabul on forming a new government. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's eastern Panjshir province remains the only province out of Taliban's control. The Taliban say they have deployed forces around the province but hope to address the issue peacefully. The Taliban has recaptured 3 districts in Banglan province, which borders Panjshir.
It's unseemable that who were those unknown gunmen who shot it. But it's also reported that it was a sniper shot which made another chaos inside Kabul airport, and then the German and Afghan forces located in there in first line there are Afghan security forces, and other lines there are US and other forces including German forces, and the fire exchange between them. And who shot the first bullet is unclear. The situation was creating vacuum and also the untrustable situation between Afghan security forces and international security forces inside capital Kabul. Yeah, the Taliban have no comment about this. As we've been talking about this, they said we were not involved in this issue. While on the other hand, they have appointed Haji Muhammad Idris as director for the central bank, and he will be doing this as acting director for Central Bank or the Afghanistan Bank. There is a pressure seemable on the Taliban to, as soon as possible, they have to establish their government. The banks should be open, the system should be allocated, and also if there is no government, every day there would be much more chaos in Afghanistan. And it is something that the Taliban believe, or they understand the situation, and they have been doing their best to finalize it.
Well, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who currently leads the G7, has called for a virtual meeting on Tuesday in the wake of the Taliban's swift takeover of Afghanistan. There are reports Johnson will ask President Biden to delay the withdrawal of US forces beyond the August 31st deadline. For more on this, let's now cross live to London, where Laura Makin-Isherwood is standing by for us. Laura, it will be a G7 meeting with a very heavy focus on Afghanistan. What more can you tell us about what to expect?
Well, this is all about G7 leaders coming together and trying to create some sort of unified response to the situation in Afghanistan. As you've said, it's understood that Boris Johnson will try to pressure, we think, US President Joe Biden into keeping some US troops in Afghanistan beyond the 31st of August deadline that had been given for full withdrawal, because they say that's kind of essential to try to ensure as many people as possible can be evacuated from Afghanistan over the coming days. Of course, that 31st of August deadline is now just 8 days away. There are still thousands of people in Afghanistan that are citizens of various Western nations, or of course Afghan nationals that have been granted permission to travel to those Western nations and leave Afghanistan, still awaiting evacuation. So the pressure is really on for countries to try to maintain that airlift process there, and they will be trying to work through how exactly to deliver that. There's also talk of potentially trying to agree some form of sanctions that might be imposed on the Taliban if they indeed breach any human rights issues or rules and regulations that are enforced. That, of course, will be on the table, how to try to impose that. But any decisions that are made by Western nations now, the G7, of course, will need to be considered by the Taliban. They now, of course, as the ruling party in Afghanistan, will have some say in what happens.
Laura, why exactly is the UK Prime Minister keen on pushing for a delay of withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan?
It's all about security of the airport in Kabul. At the moment, there are around 1,000 British troops at that airport in Kabul, assisting with the exit process, the evacuation process of British passport holders, citizens, and those Afghan nationals, as I said, who have permission to travel to the United Kingdom. There are around 6,000, though, US troops trying to secure the perimeter of that airport in Kabul. That perimeter is tens of miles long, so without that extra 6,000 capacity of personnel there, the UK forces and other NATO forces that are there in coalition might struggle to in fact make sure that that area is secure. We know that the UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has said that we're now looking at hours rather than weeks in terms of getting these repatriation flights underway. In the last 24 hours recorded, around 1,800 people were evacuated to Britain at least. We understand that there were around 9 RAF flights scheduled to return to Britain again in that next 24 hours. The pace is really picking up now because nations know that they are really running out of time to get people out of Afghanistan.
Laura Makin-Isherwood joining us there from London. Thank you. Well, the Taliban is insisting that foreign troops must stick to the deadline for withdrawing from Afghanistan. I earlier spoke exclusively to the Taliban spokesperson, Mohammed Suhail Shaheen, and started by asking about the Taliban's position with regards to the possibility of international sanctions being placed on Afghanistan. On Tuesday, the G7 leaders are meeting over the situation in your country. Among the issues on the agenda is that the United Kingdom is pushing for the economic sanctions on the Taliban. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is also expected to urge the United States to delay its withdrawal from Afghanistan. What do you make of this request?
I think if they push forward for sanction, will be a biased decision. Will be against the people of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan fought for 20 years against occupation. It was a popular uprising. You saw province after province was falling to us. In district after district, they were falling, all of them, to us, and in a peaceful manner. So it was a popular uprising. So what they are doing to impose sanction against Afghanistan is against the people of Afghanistan. While we need reconstruction of the country, we enter the new phase, a phase of peace, of peaceful coexistence, national unity of the Afghan people. So there is need for a lot for cooperation, financial support in this critical time. While the people of Afghanistan need financial support of other countries, they are talking or speaking of sanctions. So I think it is kind of hostility with the people of Afghanistan.
So, Mr. Shaheen, you did say that Afghanistan has started a new phase of peace. Now, it's been almost a week since you took over, and there's been chaos and confusion that continues with thousands of Afghans trying to flee the country. What is your assessment of the refugee and humanitarian situation in your country?
There is a two situation. One is inside the airport. That situation was created by the foreigners or the foreign countries, because they circulated a rumor that everyone who wants to go to resettle in Western countries, they should come to the airport and take plane and go there. So that is why the people rallied there, assembled at the airport with a huge congestion of people there. Sorry. This is one thing created by them. And the other is the security. The security in the city, the Kabul city, there is a full security, and our people are in control of the security situation in the city. So it's a two situation, different situation. What is artificially created by the foreigners, and the other is the real situation inside the city.
So if your people are in charge of what is happening in the city, what are the Taliban doing, though, to calm down the restive population and persuade them to stay in their homeland?
Yes, we are persuading them. We have issued statements, many statements, that the property of the people, their honor, their life is safe. When we are practically showing that, and all the schools are open, the offices are open, the people have resumed their work, and they are very happy because there peace, while there was no peace in the past. Now there is peace.
An earlier interview with the Taliban spokesperson Mohammed Suhail Shaheen. While Uganda is ready to temporarily host Afghan refugees, nearly 150 evacuees from Afghanistan are expected to land in Uganda this week. Officials say the evacuees are mainly women and children. Isabel Nakiria has this update from Kampala.
It's been extremely difficult to get information or word from the government. We just do hear, we have unconfirmed reports that they would be arriving today. The first flight being at 11 a.m. and another one at 4 p.m. But that has not yet happened. Yesterday we were told the first flight would be at 8 a.m. in the morning and the next would be at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. But still that didn't happen. We also heard that the U.S. ambassador to Uganda was at the airport trying to coordinate the arrival of the evacuees from Afghan, but still he left the airport after being told that they would arrive today. We also understand that there are a number of journalists who are camped at the airport since morning, but that flight has not yet come. Of course, we heard from the State Minister for Refugees last week that 500 of them would arrive on the first flight, and of course 2,000 would come in the next 3 months, and they would be staying in Uganda for a period of less than 3 months until when the U.S. government takes them to another country.
The U.S. government has asked Tigrayan forces to withdraw from the Amhara and Afar regions and sit down with the government for negotiations. Samantha Power, who is the administrator of USAID and is also a former U.S. ambassador to the UN, said the continued assault by the TPLF is causing more suffering to the people of Ethiopia. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more details.
Samantha Power has expressed her grave concerns about the conflict and humanitarian situation in the north of Ethiopia several times, but her latest message post on her official Twitter handle showed an even greater worry that the United States has. Power said, and I quote, "The U.S. continues to call on the TPLF to de-escalate, withdraw from Afar and Amhara, and negotiate. The TPLF's offensive will only prolong this conflict and the suffering of the Ethiopian people," end of quote. Experts say the U.S. now joins the likes of China and Russia in making a repeated and serious call for a peaceful resolution of the war in the northern part of Ethiopia. And this new communication by one of Washington's top diplomats is a move that could help quell the ongoing war. According to USAID, it's providing food for 136,000 people in the Afar and Amhara regions, where due to TPLF's offensive, according to officials, hundreds of thousands have been forced to flee away from their homes there. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Zambia's President-elect Hakainde Hichilema's top priority is fixing his country's economy. We look at the journey to the presidency. And we'll look at setbacks in administering COVID-19 vaccines in African countries.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Zambia's President-elect Hakainde Hichilema is due to be sworn in on Tuesday, the 24th of August, in the country's capital, Lusaka. The 59-year-old was declared winner of the August 12th vote, beating incumbent Edgar Lungu by a margin of 1 million votes, while securing 60% of the votes. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi takes a brief look at the profile of the incoming Zambian leader.
After 5 unsuccessful attempts at the presidency, 6 became Hakainde Hichilema's lucky number. The president-elect will take office as Zambia's next president following his victory.
Those that voted for us and those that did not vote for us, you will be treated equally, equitably, fair. That's important to us.
Hichilema is the leader of Zambia's United Party for National Development. In the 2016 presidential race, Hakainde Hichilema lost narrowly by 100,000 votes. After the 2016 election, Hichilema was arrested and charged for allegedly failing to give way to the presidential motorcade. He spent 4 months in a maximum security prison before the charges were dropped. A graduate with an MBA degree from the University of Birmingham in the UK, Hichilema worked his way up to become one of Zambia's wealthiest men. But the president-elect will inherit a troubled Zambian economy. Last year, Zambia plunged into a recession due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The southern African country has since struggled to settle its debt. Hichilema is expected to fix the ailing economy as one of his top agenda in office. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The Tanzanian government is struggling to contain criticism and misinformation about coronavirus vaccines. It has had to deal with vaccine hesitancy from sections of the public as the country desperately tries to contain a third wave of COVID-19 infections. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
COVID-19 jabs have become a source of deep discussion among Tanzanians. Over 200,000 people have already been vaccinated against COVID-19, but the government says misinformation is stopping more from getting vaccinated. The country's month-old vaccination drive has been met with fierce opposition, with some clerics leading the argument against vaccines.
When it comes to your health, take the time. Dig deep into the right source of information, which is the Ministry of Health with the reference of a health professional. Ask questions, read, get explanations. Don't just be told.
Those on either side of the COVID-19 vaccine debate hold deep convictions about their beliefs.
Vaccines are supposed to protect you from the disease, but if you ask whether you can get infected or transmit it after vaccination, the answer is yes. So what then is the use of being vaccinated?
Some have said that you get neurological problems if you get the jab, but some of us have been vaccinated and we're doing fine. And they are now saying more. This is propaganda that we must avoid as Tanzanians.
The government is using several means to dispel misinformation on COVID-19 vaccines, including holding public forums on the subject. This as the country deals with 1,367 COVID-19 hospitalizations. A section of Tanzanians believe that battles against previous COVID-19 waves were won through the use of natural remedies and faith in a higher power. The government argues that in the battle against the current wave of the virus, COVID-19 vaccines could mean the difference between defeat and victory. 5 COVID-19 vaccines have already been approved for use in the country. The government says it is targeting 60% of its 60 million people for vaccination.
Let me assure Tanzanians, for all those who voluntarily want to get vaccinated, we will ensure that vaccines are made available to them.
The government wants to win the war against vaccine hesitancy through scientific arguments. It hopes that this will enable its citizens to take steps towards a healthier, more prosperous life. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
There's been a growing push to avail the COVID-19 vaccine among Zimbabweans. The government wants to vaccinate about 60% of the country's population before the year ends. Daniel Arap Moy tells us more.
The Zimbabwean government is seeking to acquire more vaccines for its people and distribute them through its health sector.
I think in a way for us, it was a way of complementing the public sector. In our first phase of buying vaccines as the private sector, we were able to secure over 200,000 vaccines. And of that lot, we have already vaccinated upwards of 35,000 people. And we've recently ramped up numbers as vaccines became available, and we're vaccinating now almost 2,000 people per day.
A recent research shows the daily vaccination uptake figures have doubled since the government took on board the private health sector in its inoculation campaign.
The more people that are involved in the vaccination process, the better for the nation. We want to target as many people as possible. Yeah, because we hope by end of year we should have vaccinated about 10 million people by then. So it means the more we get more healthcare workers delivering the vaccines, the better we stand. We have to make sure that our relatives are protected, because so many people are losing their lives because of failure to be vaccinated.
Despite the crippling vaccine hesitancy in some parts of Zimbabwe, the government is trying its best to urge more people to get vaccinated against COVID-19. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Now, Ruth Uganze is a 33-year-old nurse who, at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, braved the odds and trauma to care for patients in hospitals. She also provided community services. Her passion for community health drove her to play multiple roles in the fight against COVID-19. She spoke to CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam.
I've been in practice for 13 years. I actually didn't want to be a nurse, but I later found out that I have passion to care for people, especially the sick and the elderly. COVID-19 came with a lot of shock and experience, some awesome, some devastating. My experience during COVID-19, I had numerous patients, some turned out positive, while others were suspected case but turned out negative. The most interesting aspect of COVID-19 was dealing with COVID patients that are not elderly. You see people in pain, having to serve medication, wearing your masks throughout your work shift, remembering that before we don't wear masks. But having to get used to wearing masks for 15 hours just to keep yourself safe and the other person safe was actually challenging. Seeing people suffer in need for air, in need for oxygen, really pained me. But that motivated me to care for people more. When COVID-19 actually came, we also have challenge of supplies. The face masks became expensive. We needed PPEs. So getting these things ready was a challenge. Where there's no equipment like face masks, we purchased ours using our own money. We went forward to even get PPEs, the ones that are not too expensive. Personally, you use and you bought like 10, you could recycle and use, not from the hospital pocket. So we did this because of the passion we have for the patient. Not just protecting ourselves, but protecting the patient as well. Because when nursing a COVID-19 patient, you're at risk. And if I contact COVID-19 and I don't protect myself, I put my family members at risk. So I took a personal measure to get my gloves, my personal protective equipment, my face masks. So it cost me extra cash. First, COVID-19, I was skeptical caring for the sick, because coming home to my kids, coming home to my husband and my old mom with comorbidity was a challenge. I could remember one of the days I had to nurse a COVID-19 patient. Coming home from the car, my husband met me in the garage. He said, "Well, honey, you don't need to come in. The children are waiting to hug you, and you know you cannot hug them." I was like, what kind of thing is this? Why can't I hug my kids after a long day at work? And I felt bad because I couldn't be free with my family, with my mom, my husband. Within the period, sometimes I feel I have common cold. I'll be like, this common cold, I hope is just a common cold. And after being tested, I never contracted COVID-19. COVID-19 actually stretched the health sector, especially nurses. We had to work longer hours. Before the pandemic, I worked 8 hours. But with the pandemic, sometimes I work 12 hours. Meaning I have to close after 8 hours. Then if there's an emergency regarding COVID-19, I have to come back. We created awareness, letting people know that COVID-19 is real. And also giving free aids, like we gave free face masks, hand sanitizers, antiseptic soaps to wash hands. I also provided means for water supply. So these things were just like community support services to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
In South Africa, CGTN's Yolisa Njamela spent a day with a paramedic and now reports on the challenges of offering critical medical aid during the pandemic.
Constance Mukwena is one of those health workers who continue working despite the odds. She's the paramedic who faces danger on a daily basis. It's a tough, demanding and risky job at times. We wonder why she would voluntarily opt for this kind of work. She immediately assessed that she believes she has all the characteristics required for one to take on this task.
It takes a very passionate person to love your job. You have to love people, be able to communicate with the community, being able to handle the little ones. So I'd say it needs a very patient person because sometimes we come across very difficult situations.
Mukwena, upon joining this profession, quickly learned that it's not for the faint-hearted.
It's actually like more difficult, especially when you are a mother, a sister, a wife. So you leave your house knowing very well that you might not make it home. Your children might not go to bed with you by their side. They don't know whether their mother will come home or not. So every day you wake up, wear your boots, you put on your uniform, knowing that you're going out there to serve the community.
And she constantly has to wait through bad days.
Worst days that I usually experience is going to squatter camps where you know that your life is in danger, where you know that they can rob you of your belongings, where you know that as a woman you might get raped.
According to the United Nations, this year is devoted to dealing with the climate crisis, the single biggest health threat facing humanity. Health workers such as Mukwena are constantly exposed to the risks of adverse effects from climate change, and they often blissfully navigate their duties unaware of the dire effects. It's workers like her that are being honored as the world marks the World Humanitarian Day. According to the United Nations, the world's most vulnerable people who contribute the least to climate change are in fact the hardest hit. and health workers are some of the most affected.
With temperatures increasing and more extreme incidences and extreme events expected as the climate change, paramedics and emergency personnel are definitely going to experience more situations where they have to go in, where climate change have actually, in a big way, contributed to the situation that they are putting themselves in, even though they might not directly experiencing it, but it will definitely affect their safety and their health directly and indirectly.
John believes that it's important to maximize the health benefits of tackling the climate crisis while avoiding its worst health impacts and promote climate-resilient health systems everywhere. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A quick recap now of our top headlines this hour. In Afghanistan, the German military says one Afghan has been killed and 3 others injured in an early morning fight with unidentified gunmen at Kabul's international airport. Kabul's airport has been in chaos in the week since the Taliban entered the capital on August the 15th. As evacuations continue, the Taliban say foreign troops must stick to a withdrawal deadline of August the 31st. The U.S. government has asked Tigrayan forces to withdraw from the Amhara and Afar regions and sit down with the government for negotiations. Samantha Power, who is the administrator of USAID and is also a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said the continued assault by the TPLF is causing more suffering to the people of Ethiopia. And Zambia's President-elect Hakainde Hichilema is due to be sworn in on Tuesday, the 24th of August, in the country's capital, Lusaka. The 59-year-old was declared winner of the August 12th vote, beating incumbent Edgar Lungu by a margin of 1 million votes, while securing 60% of the votes. And that's a look at your headlines. Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Kenya's standard gauge rail line has moved over 2 million tons of cargo in the first 5 months of 2021. And Royal Dutch Shell has lost an operating license in Nigeria to the state company NNPC after a court ruling.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in East Africa. Kenya's standard gauge rail line has moved over 2.3 million tons of cargo in the first 5 months of 2021. That's an increase of roughly 45% compared to the same period a year earlier. According to data released by the Kenya Railways Corporation, that's the state-owned entity that's managing the outfit, the rise in cargo volume saw an increase in revenue generated during the period to about $57 million. That's up from the $41.4 million generated between January and May in 2020. Kenya reported its first case of COVID-19 in March last year, and it imposed restrictions on movement soon thereafter. The number of passengers who are using the train during the first 5 months of 2021 also nearly doubled amidst the pandemic. Over 600,000 passengers were ferried between the capital Nairobi and the coastal city of Mombasa during that period, up from 330,000 in the first 5 months of 2020, in the very early stages of the pandemic. Onto the world of cryptocurrencies now. Bitcoin has surged above the $50,000 mark, as the world's largest cryptocurrency continues to rebound from its collapse some 3 months ago. After flirting slightly above and below the 50,000 mark late on Sunday, Bitcoin broke through and peaked at around 50,250 just before midnight. It was trading at around $50,263 on Monday morning. Other cryptocurrencies also advanced on the day. Ethereum was up more than 3%. Dogecoin, of all things, that was also up by at least 2%. Now, Bitcoin's price has not been above 50,000 since early May. Back then, it peaked at nearly $65,000 in April, then lost more than half of its value between the middle of May and late June. The virtual currency has surged by 13% in the last 5 days. It's up 48% in the last month, with a market cap of around $939 billion as of August 22nd. Into the world of commodities, Royal Dutch Shell's Nigerian subsidiary has lost the right to operate an oil site after a court ruled that the company was not entitled to renew a lease first granted in 1989. The appeals court in the federal capital, Abuja, overturned a 2019 ruling that effectively granted Shell Petroleum Development Company the right to renew its operating license for the Oil Mineral Lease 11 field, or OML 11. Those rights will now be transferred to the state-owned Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. Shell said in a statement that it was disappointed by this judgment and it is going to appeal it. The decision comes just as the energy giant agreed to pay $111 million to communities in southeastern Nigeria whose land was ravaged by oil spills in the 1970s. South Africa's published new electricity regulations that effectively will allow private and industrial users to generate their own power. These long-awaited regulations effectively liberalize the energy generation market, eating away, even in small quantities, at a monopoly long held by the state-owned utility Eskom. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with the details.
Large industries are expected to line up for self-generation. The new regulations allows businesses and private users to generate up to 100 megawatts of power.
I think it's going to make a huge difference. I mean, it's a factor of 100 times higher than what it was before. And it's hoped that this will really unlock a significant amount of investment by the private sector.
For years, state-owned electricity utility Eskom has been the only major power provider in the country. Other generators were only allowed to generate 1 megawatt of power under a licensing exemption threshold.
It's good. It allows companies to do a couple of things. Firstly, to get a bit of resilience in terms of the electricity supply to ensure that they have stability by generating their own. And secondly, it allows companies to be able to use more renewable.
Electricity prices in South Africa have risen over 300% in the last decade. Eskom is granted tariff increases every year. Most of this money goes towards building new power plants and maintaining old infrastructure. The utility has also been plagued by years of corruption, and taxpayers have had to bear the brunt of higher prices and erratic power supply.
Big businesses that need a stable electricity supply have been investing in their own power generation, but were stifled by regulations that allowed only minimal use.
To date, we've got about 35 stores that we've installed solar systems on. And then also we've signed up a contract with an energy provider that will install utility scale plants to generate more than 100 megawatts of renewable electricity.
Shoprite has cut its electricity bill by at least 1%, representing over $1 million. The regulations will drive a lot more investment.
We are realizing some business benefits, some financial benefits, in the sense that we are able to source the renewable electricity at a tariff that is lower than what is supplied by the national grid. We will have an energy provider providing us with electricity wheeled to our different stores. And that will represent about 25% of our electricity that we use, and will start in the next 5 to 7 years.
It will take time though, but experts are pleased that the market has been opened.
There's a whole lot of processes by NERSA that are going to have to be really streamlined in order to cater for the volume of application. At the moment, the registration process and the licensing process is very cumbersome.
While this is good news for private users, Eskom is likely to suffer a drop in sales. But with a record number of load-shedding days in 2020, many are more concerned with keeping the lights on. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Away from the continent, let's head over to China. Official data over there indicates that natural gas consumption has been rising steadily. In the last 6 years, the country has seen average year-on-year growth of over 10%. The country's natural gas pipeline network has grown to over 110,000 kilometers by the end of July, according to the China Natural Gas Development Report of 2021. Now, the country is also set to be the largest importer of LNG this year. It will account, in fact, for more than half of the additional 18 million tons of global LNG demand forecast for 2021. That's according to that particular report from the global energy consultancy Wood Mackenzie. And finally, monetary authorities in China have left the lending benchmark rates unchanged for the 16th month in a row. The one-year loan prime rate, which commercial banks usually refer to when they're pricing new retail loans, that remained at 3.85%. The 5-year LPR, though, which mostly affects mortgages, that remained at 4.65%. I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be heading over to Johannesburg to look at the case of Manuel Chang, former finance minister in Mozambique. He's facing allegations of having received bribes in a $2 billion undeclared loan scandal back in his country. The United States had wanted him, but Pretoria's decided it's a better bet to send him back to Mozambique. Why is that? Is there a quid pro quo deal here that we don't know about? We'll explore that in detail live from Johannesburg. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. When we return, we'll be looking at rebuilding efforts by those affected by wildfires in Algeria.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Algeria has experienced the worst wildfires in the country's history. This month alone, there were over 71 blazes spread across 18 provinces. Several families have lost their homes in the fires that raged for days. Many of them are starting to return to the disaster areas to salvage the little they can. Nokutula Shabalala reports.
Wildfires have ravaged the Kabylia region in northern Algeria since the first week of August. High winds fueled the rapid spread of the flames during a heatwave experienced across North Africa and the Mediterranean region. In Ad Sidima village, the flames have been contained, and some residents who fled their homes have started returning. Jamila Amer and her family lost everything in the fire.
Even this dress that I wear in front of you was lent to me by the neighbors. Everything is burnt. Everything has been lost. I did not regret the things that upset me. This is the house we have all lived for many years.
Although in shock and devastation, the families say they are grateful to have walked out of this with their lives.
Praise be to God for everything. The fire almost killed us. Our psychological state is very affected by what has happened, and we have nothing left. But despite all of this, we cling to hope and tomorrow.
The Berber region in northern Algeria was the worst affected by the fires. Firefighting planes from France, the EU and Canada helped to put out some of the fires. At least 69 people died, including soldiers deployed to help in emergency services. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
A botanical garden at the home of a renowned landscape artist and amateur botanist Roberto Burle Marx has been named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The 40-hectare property is the 23rd site in Brazil to earn that status. Lucrecia Franco has a story from Rio de Janeiro.
It is a tropical paradise, a curated collection of more than 3,500 plant species. Located in Rio's west zone, the Sítio Burle Marx is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. For 4 decades until his death in 1994, this estate was the home of renowned Brazilian landscaper Roberto Burle Marx. 10 years earlier, he had already donated it to the federal government. Burle Marx's unique style is everywhere to be found, reflecting the artist's sense of color, form, and balance with a juxtaposition of different plants he collected during his lifetime.
All these plant species were brought by him from different parts of the world. We have native species from Malaysia, China, and from all Brazilian biomes, such as the Amazon forest, for example, which were acclimatized here on the property.
Exotic imperial palms, bromeliads, cacti, flowers, both bold and subtle, peeking out from the garden's multiple tiers. Many of these plants are rare. Some have been driven to extinction in their countries of origin. It's a living work of art, says one of his longest collaborators.
I worked with Burle Marx for 20 years and I am still here. He taught me that the most important thing when you design a garden is making people feel all the plants. So you need to place the smaller ones in front of the larger ones.
The UNESCO distinction has attracted the interest of Brazilians who had never visited the garden. Visitors agree it is an unparalleled experience.
The beauty of this place cannot be put into words. You have to come here to see it for yourself. And I think everyone should come here to see this amazing example of conservation and beauty.
Part of the collection is planted in these shaded beds. Recognized as the visionary who brought art, science, and nature together, Burle Marx was also an amateur botanist who explored all of Brazil. 50 plant species that grow here were discovered by the landscape artist himself, including this one that was given the scientific name Maranta Burle Marx. Considered to be the cradle of modern tropical gardening, this unique site now has a worldwide recognition for what it is, a universal treasure that promises to promote knowledge about the art of landscaping and botany for generations to come. Lucrecia Franco, CGTN, Rio de Janeiro.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South African Paralympian Ntando Malangu sets his sights on gold in Tokyo.